Yes, the iPad Pro's Magic Keyboard is finally here, bringing this weird, cool floating screen hinge, a great keyboard, and a touchpad to the iPad Pro 2020, completing its release from earlier this year. Except, as you might notice, this isn't the iPad Pro 2020. This is Apple's 2018 iPad Pro, evidenced by the single camera up here. That means, yes, it's good for people who don't want to buy another iPad Pro. This model of Magic Keyboard works with both the previous and current generation of the iPad Pro. And that's a really good thing because it's not cheap, and we'll get to that later. Here's everything you need to know about the new iPad Pro Magic Keyboard. When it comes to the design of the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro, it's pretty cool. I've always joked that the Magic Keyboard never felt that magical, but look, the iPad just hangs off here, floating. It's really kind of cool. If you want to stop using it, just pull off. Put it back on, and it's there. Actually kind of magical. Except when it comes to design, there's also the thing that you can't not talk about, which is the heft. No, not the heavy price tag. This thing is actually kind of heavy. It's 1.3 pounds. Yes, it's heavier than the actual iPad Pro, which is 1 pound, which means they combine for 2.3 pounds, which is half a pound less than the new MacBook Air. And if you bought the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, well, you're gonna have about 3 pounds, which isn't that far off from the 3.1 pound new MacBook Pro 13-inch. Around the house, maybe I just grab the iPad and carry it around and just leave the iPad Magic Keyboard sitting there to be docked with when I get back. The Magic Keyboard's keys also illuminate, but only in the dark or when it senses there's not enough ambient light around. That's great, except when you might want to watch a movie or anything else where you don't have too much light. There's not that much space down here for new keys. So as much as I'd like a function row of keys for volume and pause and fast forward, Apple's kind of doing with a limited space, and this touchpad is pretty small already, so I guess they had to make some choices here. The Magic Keyboard has 2 ports. As you'll see here, it's first got the smart connector, and then over on the side, it has a nifty, pretty hidden USB-C port. And that means you just take the USB-C cord, plug it in down here. You can get pass-through charging to the iPad, and it just sits over here. Let's talk about the floating hinge. The hinge is really strong, first of all. Gotta say that. As you see here, it's pretty cool. Just like when you're typing, the iPad just floats in midair because you can't really see any of the hinge. It exists in the air. The other thing is, the Magic Keyboard's display hinge, it moves between about a little under 90 and up to 130 degree angle, and I kind of wish it was more. I wish you could make it a little wider range of units, because I always feel like I'm hitting the point where I should stop. Next up, let's talk about what we all need to talk about with this, how great it is to type on the iPad Magic Keyboard. But in order to do that, we have to do a little bit of comparison work here and bring in a specter from the iPad Pro's past, the Smart Type cover. I mean, I got used to the Smart Type cover, but fabric-covered keys were really shallow, and it didn't feel that pleasant to type on. Whereas on the Magic Keyboard, the iPad Pro, the keys actually feel really good to type on, and they have a good little click sound. And the Magic Keyboard has the reliable scissor switch mechanism that we've all been happy Apple returned to. And the other thing is, as you can see, one has a touchpad and the other doesn't. It's 3.9 by 1.8 inches, which feels a little small, but I've reviewed enough laptops in my time to know that they can get a lot smaller and a lot more problematic. One of the things I really like about this touchpad actually is it doesn't have a seesaw mechanism, where some touchpads only let you click down on the bottom half. Every inch of this is clickable, which is great. Also, in terms of gestures, we can talk about what we've got here, is that this is sort of just like an iPhone, in that if you swipe 3 fingers to the left or right of this, you can actually switch between apps. It's really useful, and it's really great. One thing I actually really wish Apple could have added, though, is easier keyboard and touchpad access to the dock, which is really useful for splitting your screen between 2 separate apps. As it is now, you have to swipe up and drag to split your screen. But on the touchpad and keyboard, well, it's a little more complicated. You command space, and then you grab one of these icons or type in an app that you're looking for, and then drag down and move over. You can do that with your cursor and touchpad, but only through the spotlight up at the top and not actually through the dock. Sort of makes the dock feel a little less powerful. So, Because this is a keyboard, we gotta talk about text editing apps, or word processors, if you will. I gotta say, Apple's iPad apps, its own, like Notes, are really good. Like, there's no surprise there. Apple always makes sure its hardware matches its software, one of the perks of being Apple. The only problem is that third parties need to sort of catch up. Like, for example, Google Docs. Google Docs is really needing to catch up to the iPad and the gesture controls. When I kept switching between apps, like, I noticed that when I'd go back to some text editing apps, it wouldn't automatically put my cursor back in the body of the document, which means I have to click into it and make sure I've activated it to work. Apple Notes was okay at this. Google Docs was really not good at this. As I finished working on the iPad Pro Magic Keyboard review, which I typed on the Magic Keyboard on the iPad Pro in my lap on the sofa, I had to admit, this is the keyboard case Apple should have put out originally. I like it a lot. The hinge is really strong and sturdy, which is great for actually drawing on this thing. And it's a really nice design. It's really clever. It actually feels unique and special with the screen just floating there. It's kind of weighed down. Not just by its heft, but by its price. But then again, the smart keyboard cover is no touchpad, no illumination, and only 2 positions for the iPad to go in. Even though we have ways we want to get better, the iPad Pro Magic Keyboard is definitely the best keyboard case for the iPad Pro. Stay tuned to Tom's Guide for all things Apple, iPad, and technology. I'm Henry T. Casey.